it almost doesn't really matter because really you're talking about something that is, for all practical purposes, infinite. And
Yeah.
therefore, even if 99.9% of civilizations that occur vanish, that would still leave a lot of civilizations that made it because we're talking about an infinite number of universes. So you can't really calculate how many may have made it with a definitive finite number because it could be thousands, it could be hundreds of thousands, it still could be millions, it could be billions when you're talking about infinite parallel realities and infinite multiverse, you know. So in a sense, it doesn't really matter how many failed because in infinite multiverse, an equal number could have succeeded.
Do we, let's go back to the human species. It
Mm.
seems that we have recycled ourselves, like cycled ourselves, that the universe runs in cycles, the astrological cycles, the planetary
Well,
cycles,
and
everything.
especially on Earth, yeah, we're
Yeah.
a planet of cycles, definitely.
And then as humanity has cycled, so I kind of it talked about a little bit about what happened with Atlantis, that at that
Mm.
point there was a catastrophic flood that kind of cleaned the slate, and then we had to start civilization over again,
Right.
essentially. And it seems that's uh, a kind of recurring theme in humanity, where even 20,000
Yes.
years, 40,000 years, there's these kind of stories in antiquity that talks about that. Is it
Well,
what it,
and even before what we consider to be civilizations, there have been many mass extinctions, and
right,
it's
exactly.
over again and over again and over again and over again. So yeah.
So my question to you and to Bashar is why? Why is humanity never given a straight line of evolution and consciousness shifting that is happening now? And why do we have to constantly kind of go back? Even the Yuga cycle of starting at the top, going down to the dark ages, and then now we're on our way back up. And that's why we're
Yeah.
closer.
Well,
Why do that?
a simple analogy is why don't we stay in kindergarten? Why do we graduate to the first grade? Why don't we stay in the first grade? Why do we graduate to the second grade? It's a graduation process.
Right, but then we're sent back to kindergarten after we've gotten our PhD.
But
That's my
we're not.
question.
But we're not
Okay.
because
Okay.
there is always information that remains from the previous cycle that allows us to, if we're smart enough, to use that to accelerate farther before the next cycle. So it's kind of like the old thing that Bashar said, it's not so much that we're up and down like this in a straight line. We're up and then we're down to zero and we're up and we're down to zero and we're up. It's like this, where we're constantly slowly
Um,
climbing over time. We may be going up and down, but there's always something left over that we can use to climb a little higher the next time and a little higher the next time and a little higher the next time. Until we get to the point, which is where I think we're at now, where we don't have to necessarily go through a cycle of mass destruction, but we do have to deconstruct ourselves and our society in order to now not destroy ourselves, but use the information that we've learned in the last cycle to accelerate forward without necessarily going through a completely destructive period on a massive scale. But we have to be the ones to deconstruct it now in a more positive way. So that's why, again, I'm saying it's all about stripping ourselves away from all the things that don't serve us, that don't allow us to move forward. This is one of the lessons that we are supposedly learning in this new cycle, is to let go of those things that have been holding us back to the point where we have to zero ourselves out and sort of clean the slate and start over. Now the idea of cleaning the slate is to not get rid of everything, but to keep the core essential things and keep ourselves conscious in that moment so that we can more consciously accelerate forward. And that's what's really going to give us the boost for the next cycle, is to be the masters of our own cycle, to create how we go through the next cycle, how we start the next cycle, instead of just saying, oh, we just have to erase everything and start over. Now it's like, well, we have to get rid of certain things so we can start over from a higher level instead of forgetting everything and having to start from scratch.
gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So then through these cycles, do we bring in karma or lessons that were not learned from, like, let's say the Atlantean times that we came in now? Because we're obviously technologically, from everything I've understood, and please correct me if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
Atlantis, to my understanding, had a higher level of technology in a certain way. They didn't have internet. They didn't do certain things like we have now. They didn't have
Different.
iPhones,
It was
but there was
different.
different. Yeah, they had different tech. They had that dinosaur. They had that dinosaur, the intelligent dinosaur TV show. That's for sure. But
Yeah.
other than that, so they were different technologies. But
Yes.
we didn't learn a lot of lessons. They destroyed themselves, obviously, and there was a flood, and
Yes.
there was a lot of
But they
things that
left,
happened.
but they did leave a lot of knowledge in things like the pyramids and so on and temples around the world. So again, there would be something that we would have to rediscover so all the knowledge was not completely lost. That's why we discovered and starting to discover things like, oh, look at all the math in the pyramids and look at all this in the temples, and they were all built around sort of the same time. And why is that? Well, these are markers left for us so we don't have to start completely from scratch again. So, they did leave us knowledge in a certain, just because there were survivors. So they left us
Sure,
knowledge in civilizations that help us in the next cycle. But, I wouldn't exactly call it karma in the old-fashioned sense, but definitely there
hmm
are lessons that we're picking up and taking forward. And, Bashar has recently said a few times before, Earth is a place where we're kind of finishing a lot of stories from a lot of different places, not even just on Earth.
hmm
So we've got like what he calls, the old Orion systems. People are here playing out those stories. Atlantis, Mars, all the things that we consider to have been places where we experienced high negativity, high destruction, things like that, are sort of all now here on Earth with an opportunity to end those stories differently. So this is like a real melting pot of different soul paths and different soul stories over millennia and millions of years coming to Earth to go, here is where we can create a new ending for all of these different stories. So we're a real mix of all these different, like, well, I have these connections, you have Atlantean connections, maybe you have Mars connections, maybe you have Orion connections, and we're all here going, we can use the cycles of Earth to end all these stories and transform all these stories in a much more positive way. And that's kind of what's going on here, and why the energy is so powerful and so palpable is we have all of these stories attempting to finish themselves and transform into more positive endings all at the same time. So Earth has a lot of momentum behind it to kick ourselves up to the next level by learning the lessons of all of those stories and hopefully moving them all in a more positive direction.
Is this why everything is so damn fast right now? Like, it's
Yeah.
just moving at the speed of light, technology and
Mhm.
changes and
Yeah.
systems breaking down. I mean, in the last 10 years, I
Mhm.
mean, again, you've been around the planet a little bit longer than I have, but even, in the 80s, things
Yeah.
were slow. 90s, it sped up a little bit. 2000s, it sped up a little bit more, but now it just seems like it's like a rocket ship. Every day, every month, something's
Well,
changing.
it's like exponential, that
Yeah.
you're literally are accelerate. I mean, that's what acceleration is, right? You
It's
get faster and faster in a shorter and shorter and shorter period of time. So yeah, there's a lot of momentum, a lot of energy behind the evolution of humanity. We are in that time of humanity being reset. So yeah, things are going to speed up even more. And that's what's important about understanding when we get to the point within the next 5 years where we have open extraterrestrial contact, that is really going to to be the sort of the culmination point of, okay, now you have to get used to a whole other level of what it means to accelerate because they're going to be instrumental. Well, and they have been being instrumental in helping us with technological breakthroughs and things like that. But that's all been behind the scenes. But now it's going to break out into the mainstream and now it's going to break out into public awareness. And so when we are all made aware of what they've already been doing to get us to this point and help us accelerate forward in ideally a more positive way, once that's made clear, then it's like all bets are off. Oh, okay. We've had this backing and this momentum behind us, pushing us forward in a positive way, in an accelerated way for so long that now it's like breaking the sound barrier. We're now that it's out in the open within the next 5 years, now the sky's the limit. Now we can just go, okay, let's just go. Because now we have all the resources that we never knew we had in connecting to galactic federations and all sorts of stuff. Of course, still at a pace we can handle. We're still going to be the new kids on the block in terms of the galactic family. But nevertheless, it's going to open up vistas to us that we've never really imagined before. And it's going to cause a monumental acceleration. But at first, it will probably, for some people, cause still a lot of chaos. It's like riding the rapids all of a sudden. We've been
Hmm.
sort of floating down this peaceful river and getting faster and faster and faster because the current is going faster because we're heading toward the rapids. And now in the next 5 years, suddenly we're going to be riding the rapids. But after we learn to do that, we'll come out at the other end in another peaceful river, but it will be a much faster flowing river because now it's got all the momentum of the rapids behind it. So I think that's probably an appropriate analogy for what we're going to experience in the next few decades.
To watch the full video, click on the link below. And don't forget to subscribe.